Hello, everyone. Welcome to the College Football Playbook Podcast. I am Mark Givler. We got a special guest today. It's Bill Bender of the Sporting News. Bill is a national college football analyst and does a great job for the Sporting News and is also a fellow Central Ohioan. So before we get into what we're going to talk about today, first off, who is more Pickerington, you or producer Kevin Noon? We have two Pickerington residents on the podcast here, and I'm just curious who's more Pickerington.
Noon's probably got more Pickerington. I'm going to give him credit, one, because I'm pretty sure he's lived there longer, and two, the dirty secret with me is I'm actually a Lancaster guy. So when I walk around Pickerington, it's like, yeah, I'm from Lancaster. You might get a look here or there, but you know what? I love both. I love living in Lancaster. I still love a lot of people down there, and I love having Kevin Noon as my neighbor, sort of. He's on the other side of town, but it's good to have him there.
And I lured you under false pretenses here. We are actually not going to talk about the transfer portal. We are going to preview our fantasy football matchup this weekend, the regular season finale, where I am trying to secure not only a third straight division title, but also a bye week.
Do you see the lineup I'm throwing at you this week? The injuries have hit hard. I caught the year where Aaron Rodgers went down the cliff. If you can't beat me this week, Mark, I don't know that you are, like, since I've been in that league with you and some of the others, I'm pretty sure I haven't beat you yet anyway. So something to shoot for down the road. I'm coming for you next year. We're going to bow out early this year.
We redraft the divisions after this year, and I will probably be picking second in the draft. And so I'm hoping we can keep the rivalry going. I'm going to have to. I don't know if I can trade up to the first pick to take you and put you in my division or not. We'll have to figure that out. But the rivalry will continue one way or the other. Okay, transfer portal. That's going to be the topic today. Like 1,000 guys in the portal on like the first day. This is all happening, right after championship week as the college football playoff field is set. As we look ahead to a 12-team field where even more teams are going to be focusing on playoffs right now, how do we assess the timing of this transfer portal window? For me, this is a disaster, but,
right.
What changes, if any, need to be made here? And just your thoughts on schools dealing with this while recruiting signing days 2 weeks away, while dealing with bowl games and playoff prep.
Well, you're more of a recruiting guy than me, but so taking the recruiting part out, it reminds me of if you had an NFL season where after week 18, I suppose, free agency started while the playoffs were going on. And then you have like Browns guys signing with the Steelers, or what Steelers guys going out to LA during the playoffs. That's what it reminds me of, with more guys and more moving pieces. It's got to be a nightmare to negotiate if you're a coach. High number of quarterbacks in there, high number of teams like Alabama. I think they had 11 guys in the portal. I think it's bad in general. When they made these transfer portal rules, Mark, I don't think this was the intent to have this kind of mass exodus. But then again, this is creating more opportunities for student athletes. So I don't know. I would ask you back, because I've thought about it. Do they move signing day back, forward? Which one would you do? Would you move signing day forward and then have this period after the college football season for a couple weeks? Maybe that's a solution.
So for anyone who doesn't know, my background is in covering recruiting. So I kind of have probably a different take on some of this stuff than maybe some other people who are just more on the college football beat as a whole. But I think, not to take this too far off, the early signing period has been a disaster for me. I don't know why they decided to. First of all, I don't know that college football needed an early signing period, but certainly putting it in the middle of December, a few days before Christmas, during bowl prep, during playoff prep, and really just 6 weeks before the other signing period. What are we doing? So that is like that's almost a whole other show. I would either get rid of the early signing period entirely, or I think you have to move it to like the very beginning of July, because you're letting guys have officials in the spring and into June. And so the purpose of that should be to get to a decision. And so if guys want to sign, I would make it signing like July 1st. I really would. If they have to do an early window, I personally don't even know that they need it. It's to me irrelevant. Let guys sign when, at that early period or in July, or just get rid of it, because what's happening is it's not accomplishing the intended goal, because kids are still able to finagle their way out of the letter of intent anyway, as we like the Brew McCoy situation a couple years and so getting these kids locked in only to have the coaching movement continue and the transfer portal movement continue, it's not accomplishing the intended goal of like letting kids just get their recruiting process over. It's a constant thing. So when you couple that with the fact that guys can just enroll early anyway, like you don't actually have to have an early signing period.
Right.
When we just had February, guys were still enrolling in December and January. Like it didn't change. You can still enroll early, so it's not necessary for that. So I don't even know what this December signing period is accomplishing at this point. But back to the portal, like this can't. So yes, let's get early signing out of there. Let's do that. When should the portal be opened? Shouldn't it be open? Shouldn't we be doing the portal from like mid-January until mid-February?
I said I would, if it's a 45-day window, do it January 13th or 12th, like a couple days after the championship game, and then you run it right up into spring football. That way, if guys want to go and then go play spring football somewhere, and then you do what they do. I like how they do it at the end when they open it up after spring football, and it allows quarterbacks, especially, transparency at those positions, because guys are going to transfer. I hate to dummy it down to just quarterbacks, but that's the position we all watch most. When you had a third of the quarterbacks this year for Power 5 teams were transfer quarterbacks. But 4 of the last 6 Heisman winners are transfer quarterbacks. Well, if and when Caleb wins it Saturday. Yes. That's 4 out of 6. And it's just something that we watch a lot. But I mean, I'm looking at the quarterback names in the portal, Mark, and nobody's like blowing me away like, oh my gosh, that guy's going to go there and be unbelievable. And that's another part of this that's got to be a little bit frustrating for coaches.
Well, let's start there real quick on a guy who didn't go in the portal. North Carolina quarterback Drake May. I mean, I guess he's still could technically, but he came out. There's been speculation for at least a month. It's been a hot topic for some reason. Drake May possibly transfer to North Carolina. Puts the rumors. He kind of addressed it a few days ago, but then put the rumors to bed on Twitter Wednesday night. Not going anywhere, staying at North Carolina. Why on earth was this such a thing? Because there was never any smoke on my end. And like even like Ohio State was like a school that people were talking about because they recruited him in high school and they're going to need a starting quarterback next year. And so like even like this was like a thing in the Ohio State market. This was a thing in like Alabama because they had his commitment at one point, and basically any top 15 type 10 top 10 type team who has a quarterback competition coming up was kind of linked to Drake May. Was there ever any legitimacy to this that you had heard, or because from my end, it never made sense?
No, I talked to Drake May in September. We did a profile on him when he got off to the hot start. And I talked to his dad, who, I mean, that's like Mac Brown was saying, this is a North Carolina kid whose dad played at North Carolina. I talked to his dad. This was the only school for him once Mac was there. It raised my eyebrows a little bit when Phil Longo left because he talked at length about his relationship with Longo. So, but I don't think it's enough for him to leave a school that he loves. And he obviously tweeted about it. And I get the Alabama connection because a lot of people are wondering what happens with Alabama when Bryce Young goes pro, what they have on the roster with Simpson and Jalen Milroe. We saw Jalen Milroe. I don't know that they're a national champ. Yeah, exactly. That's how I think. I mean, solid quarterback, not a national championship team with him at quarterback though. So we'll see how it goes. But no, I don't see Drake May going anywhere, and that's a good thing for North Carolina. He had a great season despite the less than stellar finish they had as a team.
Yeah, that one never made a lot of sense to me. That family just bleeds Carolina blue. And I mean, let's be honest, they've built a pretty good roster there.
Mm-hmm.
Like if Drake May is what we think he is with the surrounding skill there, I know you know Josh Downs be off to the NFL, but they've got a lot of young skill talent there. Mac Brown's recruited very well. It never made any sense to me. Caleb Williams following Lincoln Riley makes sense.
Right.
Justin Fields going to Ohio State with their opening where he's kind of locked behind a guy at Georgia makes sense. Like Jalen Hurts going to Oklahoma made sense. This one never added up to me, and I just almost felt like a social media creation of people just assume, well, we've seen this happen before with other high-profile quarterbacks, and everyone still kind of looks at North Carolina as maybe a middling program, but they're really not anymore. So it just never passed the smell test for me.
Right.
So that was interesting to me that there was so much attention paid to that. But let's get into guys who are in the portal. And you wrote a story on sportingnews.com, transfer portal watch, quarterbacks on the move stories that people can go look at that if they're interested. It's a good read. Just talking about, the guys who are the big name quarterbacks who are in the portal. So much, as you mentioned, so much of this portal stuff is the quarterback position, as it can just kind of immediately elevate your team if you can land a Caleb Williams type of player. Some interesting names. We could talk about 3 or 4 different guys. Like who is most interesting, I guess, to you at this point among the 3? We'll talk about a few different guys, but like, is there one guy here that jumps to you?
Well, I actually had kind of a question before I got into that. Was when you look at these guys, you forget how long some of them have been in school. Like Spencer Sanders, it's like, okay, are we on 6th year now or 5th year? And obviously COVID played a role in that, but it is very strange to me. Like Brennan Armstrong, for example, is Virginia's all-time leading passer, still has eligibility. I think he was a 4-year starter. He's going to play another year. So he's interesting because I think he could be good at the right fit. The most interesting guy to me is DJ Uiagalelei, because where does he land? One, and does he figure it out? He's a 5-star talent. We've seen that talent in spurts, but we've also seen a lot of inconsistency. What does he land at a place where I didn't think Clemson had great receiving talent? Now that could change my mind real quick if Cade Klubnik goes out and blows up the Orange Bowl. But he's definitely a guy I had my eye on. A bunch of ACC quarterbacks that I apparently had misranked in the preseason. I learned how to spell or pronounce Phil. I've been calling him Jerkovich, but apparently it is Jerkovic. So I screwed that up all week. And I think he's an interesting fit at Pitt with his old offensive coordinator. They did not hit the transfer portal lottery this year with Slovis, but they did. Perhaps they did with Phil, and he gets them back up in the Coastal. But so those are a couple guys. And then, of course, Big Ten wise, well, I don't know, Mark. I'm not quite sure what people are expecting out of Cade McNamara at Iowa. I think it'll be decent, but it's not like they're going to come out and be averaging 38 points per game next year.
Are they doing something different with their offensive coordinator?
Right. Like if they're
not,
doing, right. And that's, I mean, maybe Eric All goes there with him, which is there's some smoke there, but still, I just don't.
Had a good tight end this year.
Yeah, they
Sam
have
Laporta's
very good. So, I mean, those are the guys that jump out at the quarterback position, and I'm sure there'll be more. I mean, obviously, that's when you have that high number. I'm sure once like we said, into spring football, there's going to be a lot.
You kind of started down a rabbit hole I went down a few weeks ago, with the quarterbacks. So Stetson Bennett is like the same age as Lamar Jackson,
right?
Hendon Hooker is turning 25 if he hasn't yet. Even like someone like Jaron Hall at BYU is, I think about
Right.
to turn 25, and he's got another year left if he wants it.
Noon had some great tweets about Sean Clifford, I believe, during the season. And I think Noon might have tweeted, it was him or somebody else that tweeted, his superpower is staying in college football. So I think Sean Clifford will maybe not be, he might still be Penn State's quarterback in 3 years. I don't know.
But what I'm interested about with that is obviously it's not going to be this way forever because like the COVID year kind of screwed some things up. But like the power vacuum that's going to be created when all these, I think I joked about, I don't know if it was on our site or on Twitter, but I fired off something a few weeks ago. I'm like, man, the power vacuum is going to be created when all these like 30-year-old quarterbacks eventually like move on is going to be interesting because it is a something to me that a Tennessee or a Georgia can trot out a quarterback who is like 4 years older than every other quarterback they're playing. Like that is, could you imagine Lamar Jackson playing college football right now? Like,
Right.
could you freaking imagine that? Like, it would be even more of a video game than it was the first time around. It just would be unbelievable. And I do wonder, like, eventually this will come down a little bit. Although I do think like the grad transfer thing and all that stuff's kind of here to stay. But like that COVID year just gave us this like whole collection of like literally 25-year-old quarterbacks. And I wonder what's going to happen when that whole wave like moves on and washes out. And that's going to happen this year and probably next is probably going to be, that washout period. Cause as you said, like Brennan Armstrong's still with us. So that's going to be interesting to me, I think, is just
so anybody that was a freshman in 2020 essentially already has an extra year on top. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at like, I think you're right. By 2025 or 2024 into that will be mostly figured out because like some of those guys that are freshmen, if they didn't play, they didn't play. But, like I said, some of these guys that have put up these numbers, it's like, I was just like, oh, wait, that guy's well. And then JT Daniels is a great example. Is this what the transfer portal, and I'm not knocking JT Daniels. He's doing what's best for him, but was it designed for a player to go to 4 different schools? I don't think it was.
No, I don't.
And that's why I think one amendment should be if you transfer a second time, you should have to sit a year. Either sit a year or lose a year. It should be one or the other.
Yeah, they're going to have to really look at this, but that kind of brings me to a bigger, where is the leadership? Well, there has been, and we won't go down the NIL rabbit hole today, but there has been just a staggering lack of foresight. And I'm coming at this from I'm a pro player guy in pretty much all of these situations. I do like their ability to get the instant transfer when coaches can come and go freely. I do like their ability to monetize, especially their name, image, but to get paid for what they're doing, putting their bodies on the line. I've been a big proponent of that for years, but you had to have a plan in place before this stuff got put into action. And it just feels like there hasn't been. And it feels like the NCAA is very content to be like, oh, no, you guys wanted this. So now you guys can deal with it.
I agree with you on that last part. Definitely. They're just like, hey, this is what you wanted. Don't blame us. This is the intent. Again, I say this all the time. The intent of some of these rules and what's happened, not the consequences weren't expected. I don't think NIL had the consequences with, we've seen some developments in that with which schools are honestly going to be able to keep up. And that's something. And again, I'm not a huge recruiting guy. I know there's other people that do recruiting so much better than I do. I follow it with a very light brush, but for me, and this is just speaking freely, I don't value recruiting rankings as much anymore because I'm like, how many of these guys are actually going to be here in 3 years? And maybe that's maybe that's a light way of putting it. I mean, but I still think like Ohio State's and Michigan and Alabama, they're still going to do well, but look at A&M's class. Yeah. I mean, did that number 1 class, number 5 class, did those matter the last 4 years? Because no, they're losing a lot of them. And 2, the production isn't meeting the end. So, these are all things. And then on top of all this, Mark, we have playoff expansion, which how is that going to skew how we look at seasons? And part of me is excited for that part of it. And the other part is like, you kind of just like are looking at it and like, this could be a total disaster for college football, the sport that we grew up with and loved.
I'm a big my number was 8 for expansion. I thought that was a better sweet spot. I'll live with 12. If they try and go to 16, now I think we're going off the rails a little bit. But my first instinct when I see like you see these mock brackets. This is what the 12 team, and my first instinct is that's going to be the greatest weekend of football the entire year. But then I remember that what we're talking about here today is happening with the portal.
Right.
And I'm like, how are teams going to play, 2-3 playoff games through December while signing their recruiting class, making in-home visits, managing the portal,
injuries,
yeah, like, wow.
What happened? Like you look at Michigan and losing Blake Corum, Tennessee losing Hendon Hooker, the NFL in general. I tell people this all the time. The NFL is generally speaking, your team will go far if you stay healthy. How many NFL playoff teams drop off the radar? Look at the Rams this year, for example. So how many college football teams with those extra games? How many more injuries do you have? That's why I was like kind of laughing at this notion with Tennessee and Hooker. I'm like, well, High State's been playing without a guy that I wrote early in the season that could be the best receiver ever. And Michigan lost Corum. TCU's had injuries. Georgia lost Nolan Smith. How many more guys factor in there? I think that's another part of this, that when we go to playing all these games, it's different than Division III. Like, you can't say because these guys are 5-star, bigger, faster, stronger guys, and there's going to be more injuries.
Yeah. It's very much in the same theme as some of the other changes where I look forward to it. I like the idea of it, but please, dear God, have a plan in place before this is implemented, because you haven't on NIL, you haven't on the portal. These are all, I think, sound ideas for the players and for most people involved, but you can't just wing it. You have to have some type of plan in place before these things are actually implemented. So that's my stance on the expansion, is like, I love it. It's exciting to me, but yet in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh boy, they don't have a plan for this, do they?
So like for me, like it's okay. Like, I get this question a lot. It was like, well, if you were commissioner of college football, what would you do? And then like to lightly say everything you and I have just discussed, can we fix college football in 20 minutes? It's like, to me, it's like, figure out that signing period, either move it I like all the way into July, because then you let the high school kids play their last season, because as you said, I live in Pickerington. There are kids that can sign and then play their last season. I mean, it's important to remember, like Sonny Styles could have been a senior this year. I'm not saying he did anything wrong. I'm glad that he went to Ohio State and doing the things he's did, but it allows kids like him to make those decisions. And either I'm going to play my senior year or I'm going to sign. I'm good. Transfer portal, January 15th, January 11th, whatever is after. It's probably going to move back to January 22nd-ish once we go to the 12 team. That's fine. I would have had an 8 team instead of 12, just like you. I think once you get into 9, 10, 11, 12, you don't have teams that are serious about winning a national title. So another way I would do that is, this is my like controversial take. I would do away with the conference championship games and just put the 8 to 12 best teams from there. Just that's the 12 that we're playing. And what was the last one? I think we've fixed most of the problems there. Yeah. That's what I would do.
That's a good point on conference championships. Now they're not going to do that, I don't think, because money. But you can crown a conference champion. You can just the NFL doesn't have division championships. The Eagles and the Cowboys are not going to play for the NFC East championship in Week 19 this year. They're going to look at the regular season record and head-to-head tiebreakers and all that other stuff, and they're going to determine who the champion is. So, you could totally do that.
In NIL, we've got maybe they go to like a salary cap. I don't know if you can do it, but you're going, because of the way and the passion and the money that's behind this sport, I think there's a risk for that going off the rails, where you're asking, donors and people that follow the program to put more and more money into this. It's, I think, a salary cap on what your student athletes can make makes sense. And the pushback on that will be like, well, CJ Stroud's worth this much, but is a college quarterback really worth more than an NFL quarterback? That's the debate. I see both sides of it, but I would put a salary cap on what NIL can be.
That's a whole other episode because
maybe you and I can come. Yeah,
that takes us down the employer whole thing. The NCAA spent $1 billion trying to avoid in the courts relationship. I think when you start to bring in salary caps and stuff like that, now it's like, okay, now you are employees, and we know how the NCAA feels about that. So that I think is the hurdle there, but. Because fundamentally, I wouldn't be opposed to something like that. The NFL is a salary cap. There's only so much money, Patrick. You're only gonna be able to pay Patrick Mahomes so much money. So fundamentally, I don't disagree with that. But that's a whole employer. Are these employees legal? Right. Hundreds of millions of dollars in attorney fees and everything else battle. So quickly back to the portal here before. So you think where do you think like a Keaton Slovis, like JT Daniels, where do these guys go from here? Because what generally happens is for a lot of these guys, with the exception of like a Caleb Williams or a Jalen Hurts type of guy, a lot of these guys you are dropping down a little bit each time. Like where does a Keaton Slovis or a JT Daniels fit in this environment? Because you're not going from, it didn't really work at West Virginia for you. So now it's, where's it going to work?
That's what I don't understand is why wouldn't you're starting? Are they telling you you're not going to start here next year? I mean, Spencer Sanders is the weirdest one to me because I actually think he could play somewhere if he stays healthy and do well, but you've got to stay healthy. So, I mean, the number of quarterbacks that leave that are actually starting is the one that startles me the most. And, for every Michael Penix story where he was able to leave Indiana and have a great year at Washington, probably should be in New York too, by the way. Those guys, then there's a story like Slovis who went somewhere else. It's not working, like JT Daniels, where it's not working. There are a couple others like that obviously every year we're going to have more stories like that. So I don't know is the short answer. Like, I don't know who's going to go all in on them. I don't know who's going to go all in on a Devin Leary who 2 years ago had 35 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. This year he battles injuries, has a disappointing year. And I'm wondering, where does he fit in? And I think he could do a good job in certain places, but he was doing a good job at NC State.
Yeah. Yeah. That was an interesting one for me too. That one in Slovis, and then, but not to be all conspiracy theorist and negative, but you wonder with the Slovis thing if there wasn't maybe like, hey, we're going to be bringing in somebody that we like better. So,
or Drew Pine, who kind of salvaged Notre Dame's season. It's like, well,
that was a weird one too.
It's like, well, so that must mean on some level that Buchner may have a shot, and they'll probably bring somebody in to compete with Buchner.
Yeah.
And that's what that feels like.
So you always, like, the coaches and players always know more than the rest of us. So sometimes things maybe don't make sense to us, and there's been conversations that behind the scenes, or maybe that even shouldn't really be taking place at all, that are happening. And, you have to kind of work backwards from, logic doesn't always work that way. You kind of have to work, okay, this is what happened. Let's backtrack on why this could have happened that way. And I think that's probably what happened with Slovis. But DJ's interesting to me. He's the most interesting name to me for a couple of reasons. But mostly because his younger brother, Mateo, is a 5-star defensive line recruit. And so the package deal rumors are out there. Now, you have to kind of look at who Mateo is looking at, which right now appears to be Ohio State, USC, and Oregon appear to be the top 3. There are other schools involved. I know Alabama's been involved, a few others. But I don't know if that's going to fit. So it comes down to, will DJ go somewhere where he is not basically granted the starting position, or even more so in the case of somewhere like USC, would DJ go somewhere where he knows he's not going to be the starter?
That one, that's the one that least fits of the two. So if you run down the other two, Oregon, I mean, if they, you go on from Bo Nix, he makes sense there, and that well, sort of, because he runs a little bit, but remember they were begging him to run. It's kind of like the CJ Stroud thing, but
yeah,
where CJ is this year is where they were last year with DJ. He ran a little bit more this year. Would he fit it all? Let's run through the Ohio State scenario. Let's say Stroud moves on, goes to the NFL. McCord and DJ is a competition at minimum. Like,
and you got Devin, Devin Brown's supposed to be in that mix as well. So that's going to be, but I don't think, certainly Ohio State's not going to, and I don't know that even Oregon would. I don't think either of those schools are going to tell DJ like, yeah, you're going to be
the guy.
Like like both of those schools are too good to promise that to someone who has not proven to be an elite quarterback. I think he's been capable at times. He's looked good at it at times, but they're not going to. So he's not going to get any guarantees from any of those three. He's definitely not starting at USC. So the question is, if this package deal is actually going to happen, and they're going to play, he wants to play with his brother for a year or something. Is that even feasible?
Right. Well, that's not just the problem with him. I mean, every quarterback in this thing, there's not one where I'm like, yeah, he'll definitely start. Yeah. Maybe Devin Leary, maybe DJU, depending on the fit. And then, honestly, this is a weird pick, but maybe Austin Reed, the Western Kentucky kid that put up ridiculous numbers. And but that's not like Austin Reed's going to go to Tennessee and start, or somewhere like that. It's definitely, he could start at a lower level Power 5 school, and I think he will. But DJ, yeah, definitely a guy that we'll see. I mean, and I always, 5-star talents attract me because Bo Nix, it was just a classic example of, we made jokes about him for years at Auburn. We were like, the Bo Nix experience is this. He's so inconsistent. What's next? There was less of that at Oregon because he was very good. He was a very good fit in that offense. Had some Bo Nix moments, but if he doesn't get hurt against Washington and for like some weird, bizarre coaching decisions, Oregon may have been in the Pac-12 championship game.
Right. I think the theme for these guys is probably, you hope they're being advised well, because they're going to have to, I think, lower their expectations. They're going to either have to transfer well down the totem pole if they want to be a starter, or they're going to have to throw out this idea of, I'm going wherever I'm going to be a starter no matter what. Like, they're going to have to either entertain the idea that they're really going to have to battle for a job, or they're going to have to go, from a Clemson, you're going to have to go pretty far down the ladder from where these guys are coming from. So that's going to be the interesting thing to me, is like the decisions these guys make, because if it's not working at West Virginia, it's not working at Texas or, I mean, it's just not, you have to, kind of lower your expectations a little bit. So we'll see if they do that. Last guy we'll talk about, because he fascinates me because he's quite frankly one of the top 2 or 3 linebacker prospects I've ever seen in high school. Justin Flo is in the transfer portal, Oregon linebacker. Again, it's probably like him and Reuben Foster are probably like the best 2 high school linebackers I've ever seen. Flo has had no shortage of injury issues. I've watched a lot of Oregon the last couple of years. It seems like he does flash. It seems like there are times where for a week or 2 he gets healthy and he does a few things. You're like, oh yeah, that's the guy I remember. But it's been very tough for him to put that together. What type of like risk tolerance, I guess, would you be willing to take on? If you're Alabama or Ohio State or Georgia or Clemson, are you looking at Justin Flo?
Yeah, he should be. I mean, I did a story on him when he was in high school, so that's a career that I've tracked a little bit. Same as you, like his high school highlight film, really all the way down to like when he was in youth football. His tape is amazing. So you were like, this guy's going to be unreal. Injuries definitely have gotten in the way, but he's been solid. Opposite Noah Sewell when he was playing. I think a couple of the schools that I'd mentioned, when he was through the recruiting process, Ohio State was part of that. Alabama was part of that. He was definitely looking at Miami. Miami, definitely a school where he'd probably fit. So it is just a question of he's a California kid too. So does he want to move across the country? USC was another one that he was looking at. So you wonder if Lincoln Riley could work his transfer portal magic. And I do think he's a guy where if the injuries aren't in the way, like you said, there's that moments of like brilliance, but can he piece that together consistently and stay healthy on top of it? If he can do that, he's a guy who's definitely going to get a shot on Sunday no matter what. It's just a matter of how high he goes up the board with that next opportunity.
Yeah, I think I'd roll the dice too, and I'm usually pretty conservative on this stuff. I would not overuse the portal if I were a lot of these schools. I think there are unintended locker room consequences to it. I think oftentimes there are reasons these guys are leaving, and it's usually not good.
Right.
So I'm generally more conservative on that and wanting to, find one or two spots where you're weak that can maybe cost you a playoff berth or something and just go hyper aggressive at those two. But I think Justin Flowe's worth a shot. Thanks, Bill, for doing this. We, like I said, you have the transfer portal quarterback story up on sportingnews.com. Please go read that and track all the movement of college football free agency is here, people. Let's call it what it is.
Thanks for having me on. And anytime you and I pretty much figured that out in like 20 minutes there, so we can figure out all the rest of college football's problems as we go forward. And yeah,
we'll tackle NIL next. We'll figure NIL out.
We're gonna need a couple hours for that one.
Yeah, we might need more time. Thanks, Bill. Great job as always, and looking forward to seeing you soon.
All right, thank you.